I must say, it's an injustice for us to summarize everything in 5 minutes when we had extremely fruitful discussions over 2 hours. But this is our best approach. In our case for sustainable tourism, we took a bit of a different approach in the sense that we asked the 12 participants who we had available, we asked them to present very quickly a couple of project ideas which they had available to their mind. We very quickly went over those, and then we asked them to vote for 2 particular projects. And so what I'll do is I'll just give you a brief idea, but very quickly in terms of where the discussion took us. And as expected, for sustainable tourism, it took us in various areas. So we looked at eco-islands, we looked at how we can reduce plastics, waste and different resources, governance, awareness, knowledge sharing, potential networks, so for example, nautical stations, the importance of planning, coastal tourism and inland tourism and creating innovative products in that regard. So as you can imagine, the discussion could have been very varied. But what we did was, as I said before, was we focused on 2 projects. And we focused on 2 projects, which I will mention now, and we tried to structure 3 key elements in that regard. The first one is, well, we obviously were focusing on the MFAF call and whether these projects' ideas could really fit into the MFAF call, because obviously it presents a great opportunity at this particular point in time. And with the deadline, I think we stand very ready and in a very opportune time to be able to take that opportunity. And we looked at, first and foremost, the technology element of it, because obviously that is where the call lies, and where do these 2 projects, how can they focus on the technology element. We looked at who the consortium could be composed of, okay, and the members and the stakeholders who that could reach to, and then what would be the impact of the project in that regard. So the first project was basically, we had very strong votes for the WestMED Natur project and the importance of capitalizing on the results which have already come out from that project, and therefore we focused quite a lot in that regard. In terms of technology there, we were looking at, for example, how can we develop apps, gamification for students, maybe even going further and engaging them in the product that is being offered, looking at the ecosystem element of it, the collection of data which can be used, how that can feed into policy recommendations. So there's definitely a very strong digitalization element which exists in that regard. In terms of the impact that it has, there's a very strong impact in terms of engagement of citizen science, engaging them in that regard, where all the, for example, having impact in terms of quantifying that impact. So we're engaging students in terms of having these transactions in other countries. For example, if they're engaging in beach cleanups, the extent to which they've collected waste, what does that mean in terms of carbon reduction? So putting things into numbers and having them, because at the end of the day, this is the next generation which is coming up. In terms of the consortium, or which could exist, obviously because this is already an existing project and there's definitely scope of capitalizing on it, we looked at where we could expand. Obviously, there's definitely scope in terms of expanding from a geographical aspect, so even across maybe sea basins, the different sea basins as well, and including other countries which are not currently within the project. But more importantly than that, there's definitely scope in terms of addressing other target groups. So, for example, different SMEs, different local communities, the hospitality sector, but also looking at other aspects in terms of other stakeholders. Definitely a role for networks, so for example the European Blue Network of schools to be engaged in it, because that would give a great platform. The idea of possibly having other schools involved, because there could be a kind of like a scoreboard kind of where other schools could be involved, so that there's definitely scope over there. And obviously the consortium would apply for other enterprises, definitely room for digital partners, social impact partners, and even trade associations. So that was one of the key projects. Definitely has potential. Anyone obviously who's involved, kindly reach out not only to us within the working group for sustainable tourism, but in particular Marika. So if you could give a show and raise your hand over there, it's definitely something which I'm sure we will be working on in the coming weeks to develop this project further. The second project is a project idea which was spearheaded by Francesco, and it's kind of based on the smart sustainability development the development of a smart sustainability platform. So the idea is, yes, the development of a platform, but rather it is the use of that platform for different stakeholders within the tourism sector in terms of its use. So in terms of technology, we were looking at, for example, the development of kind of an information platform which could be available for hotels, for example, or museums. But the focus is on creating awareness on how these businesses, for example, have a role in terms of sustainable tourism and what is the direct positive impact that they are playing in terms of tourism and sustainable tourism. Because one of the points which was raised was that at the end of the day, the business sector is facing difficulties in terms of communicating how it is being sustainable. And possibly there's a role there. In terms of consortia, various. I mean, there's the role for possibly social experts, because this could potentially lead to behavioral effects, the use of digitalization on how to influence people's decisions through the development of this platform, possibly also having more social experts, anthropology experts kind of, but also possibly also engaging in citizen science. So Francesco, if you could raise your hand as well so that people will know who you are. We've got to develop this project proposal a bit further, but definitely one which also has another role. In the coming weeks...
30 seconds.
30 seconds, okay, I thought I was fast. In the coming weeks, we'll not only focus on these two projects, but we saw that there's potential in the other projects which were mentioned as well, and therefore, obviously, we would like to develop them even further. Okay?